Evelyn was an aspiring author, tirelessly working on her first novel in a small, quiet town. For months, she'd poured her heart into the manuscript, perfecting every detail. But one night, she stumbled across something strange while researching at the local library. A dusty, old book caught her eye, an author she'd never heard of, someone named R.L. Ashford. Curious, she flipped through the pages. To her shock, it seemed to tell the story of her life, scenes from her childhood, her recent move to the town, even her own thoughts and fears. Every page was eerily accurate. Confused, Evelyn took the book home. As she read more, the words seemed to shift, forming a new chapter that mirrored the very novel she was writing. The protagonist in the book bore her name, her struggles, and even the storyline she had just developed. But the last chapter was blank, except for one line: "You will write the final page, or it will be written for you." The next night, Evelyn sat at her desk, her hands trembling. She had no choice but to finish the story. As she typed the final sentence, the room grew cold, and her typewriter began to clack on its own. When she looked up, her surroundings had changed. She was no longer in her apartment, but in a dark, abandoned house. The air was thick with dust, and the floor creaked underfoot. She was no longer in control of her own body, her fingers moving across the keys without her command. Suddenly, the door behind her creaked open, and a shadowed figure entered. It was R.L. Ashford, or rather, the version of him from the book. His eyes glowed faintly, and his voice was a low whisper. "You finished my story," he said, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. "Now it's time to finish yours." Before she could react, Evelyn felt herself being pulled toward him, as if the very air was drawing her in. Her body froze, unable to move as the figure loomed closer, his presence suffocating. As he reached out, she saw the words in the book shift again, this time, the letters forming a sentence written in her own blood, sealing her fate. The author who writes without an end becomes the story itself. The last thing Evelyn saw before she was consumed by darkness was her own reflection in the glass, staring back at her with lifeless eyes. And in that moment, she realized that her story had already been written, and there would be no escaping it.